The multifaceted history of the European continent offers a reason for the complex situation it is today. The United States and its European allies are advancing in their positioning in the seas of the region, while Russia is preparing a strategy to stop the siege. After the war in Ukraine, the blockade of Kaliningrad through Lithuania, the potential NATO membership of Finland and Sweden, and the increased military equipment surrounding the borders of Eastern Europe, Russia feels threatened and the conflict has escalated. The questions remain: are Russian forces preparing for war? And what is NATO's objective? Let's explore together and find out how this conflict over the seas could change the global landscape. At the recent NATO summit in Madrid, one of the highlights was the opening of the way for the final accession of Finland and Sweden to the alliance, thanks to the withdrawal of objections by the Turkish government. But what does Finland and Sweden's accession to the Washington Treaty mean for the North Atlantic Alliance? It is a monumental change for two nations with a long history of wartime neutrality and staying out of military alliances. A shift that will transform the security landscape in Europe for years to come, and further strain relations with Russia, which opposes the alliance's eastern expansion. But why the sudden change? Vladimir Putin's actions have shattered a long-standing sense of stability in Northern Europe, leaving Sweden and Finland vulnerable. Let's take a look at these countries. For many Finns, the events in Ukraine are familiar. The Soviets invaded Finland in late 1939. For more than 3 months, the Finnish army put up fierce resistance, despite being greatly outnumbered. They avoided occupation, but ended up losing 10% of their territory. Finland's neutrality arose as a condition of peace imposed by the Soviet Union in a 1948 friendship agreement. It was seen as a pragmatic way to survive and maintain the country's independence. But times and the perception of risk have changed. Now, most Finns say they are prepared for a change in their country's status. As for Sweden, the country has used its neutrality to position itself as an international mediator and is considered a leader in global nuclear disarmament efforts. For many, joining NATO would be abandoning the dream, as Swedish neutrality was a matter of identity and ideology, but Finland's abandonment of its neutrality and tensions in the Baltic have left Sweden feeling it has lost its safety zone, feeling in danger over the past few years. In 2014, Swedes were transfixed by reports that a Russian submarine was lurking in the shallow waters off the Stockholm archipelago. 2 years later, the Swedish military returned to the small but strategically important Baltic Sea island of Gotland after abandoning it for decades. But what does NATO benefit from the Finland and Sweden's membership? The addition of these countries could offer the alliance greater land, sea, and air capabilities. The alliance would consolidate in the Baltic and Arctic with the addition of two powerful and well-equipped militaries. Sweden has a powerful navy, including Swedish submarines, which would strengthen NATO's defenses in the Baltic Sea, and builds its own fighter aircraft, which it exports to countries around the world. While in Finland, it is a whole-of-society approach to thinking about defense, maintaining compulsory military service for men. They can mobilize hundreds and thousands of their citizens, said Christopher Skaluba. In addition, recently Finland further modernized its armed forces, investing more than $10 billion in the purchase of 64 F-35 jets. But the countries also offer key geostrategic advantages, which would enhance NATO's defenses. Let's look at some of them. A new northern border. The accession of this country would double the alliance's land border. Having a longer border would provide more information about Russia. Finland's border with Russia stretches over 1,300 closely patrolled kilometers. This would provide NATO with greater deterrence, as Moscow would have to defend this border. Although on the other hand, NATO must also protect this border against a Russian attack. In addition, Finland's accession would bring the alliance closer to Russia's Kola Peninsula, a strategic landmass where about 110 kilometers east of the border is Murmansk located, where Russia keeps ballistic missile submarines, stores nuclear warheads, and is also where the Northern Fleet, in charge of military patrol missions in the Arctic, is based. On the NATO side, Sweden and Finland could help control this activity, but could also increase the risk of escalation. In general, the Arctic is considered a success story of cooperation between NATO Arctic nations and Russia. Historically, the GIUK gap, named after the acronym for Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, and that is the gap between the two stretches of open ocean between these three landmasses, has been strategically crucial as a means of navigating the otherwise more difficult Arctic Ocean. But there is concern that it will increasingly become a contested area in the security realm, something that is surely more likely, with Sweden and Finland joining NATO, to mean an increase in their forces in the Arctic. Knowing that more than 50% of the Arctic Ocean coastline is Russian territory, Moscow considers security in the area to be a matter of national defense, added Christopher Skaluba. Recently, the Russian government has also accused Norway of blocking the border point of Storskog, through which Russian supplies are usually taken on their route to the Svalbard archipelago, a strategic enclave in the Arctic 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole and under Norwegian sovereignty, but where 3,000 people of 50 different nationalities live, including Russian minors. Norway, for its part, has justified the measure, stating that it is only in compliance with the blockade agreed by the European Union as a consequence of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. As regards the Baltic Sea, the accession of Finland and Sweden would give the alliance an advantage in the Baltic Sea, a strategic waterway bordering the Russian city of St. Petersburg, as well as some of NATO's most vulnerable members, the Baltic countries. Currently, NATO reinforcements rely on the Suwalki Gap, the narrow corridor separating Kaliningrad and Belarus that Russia could attempt to close in a conflict. Swedish and Finnish NATO membership would provide NATO with another reinforcement route through the Baltic Sea. In the middle of the sea lies Gotland, a 175-kilometer-long Swedish island that is home to military fortifications. In April, Sweden announced it would increase its forces on the island, including expanding barracks to house more troops and sophisticated weaponry, turning it into an unsinkable aircraft carrier, as the island is only 300 kilometers from the home of Russia's Baltic Fleet in the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, between Lithuania and Poland. We have seen the picture from a NATO point of view, but what has Russia said about all this? What does Russia think of these NATO measures? Vladimir Putin pointed out that Moscow has no problems with Stockholm and Helsinki should they become part of the alliance. We do not have with Sweden and Finland those problems that unfortunately we do have with Ukraine. We have no issues, no territorial disputes. We have nothing that could worry us from the point of view of Finland's and Sweden's membership in NATO, the Russian leader assured. If they want to join NATO, go ahead, but they should understand clearly and precisely that in case of deployment there of military contingents and infrastructure, we will be forced to respond reciprocally and create the same threats to those territories from where the threats to us are created, the Russian leader sentenced. In addition, Russian President Vladimir Putin denounced the imperial ambitions of NATO, which seeks, he said, to assert its hegemony through the conflict in Ukraine. Ukraine and the welfare of the Ukrainian people are not the goal of the West or NATO, but a means to defend their own interests. They want to assert their imperial ambitions, Putin said. According to his words, Moscow's position on NATO is that the alliance is just a political tool of the USA. In addition, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in an interview, NATO essentially goes to war with Russia through a proxy, and arms that proxy. Several experts say Russian officials have ramped up threatening rhetoric as a way to stoke fear in NATO allies. Others feel it is an effort to win over the Russian public. All along, Russian domestic propaganda has emphasized that Russia is not at war with Ukraine, but with NATO and the West, notes Yuri Zhukov, international geopolitics specialist. This framing makes it easier to explain military casualties to the domestic audience, and also helps lay the political groundwork for a potential all-out wartime mobilization in Russia, which the regime has so far been hesitant to announce. But what is Russia's response to all these NATO measures? Number 1. Rescue of Kaliningrad. The importance of Kaliningrad, home to Russia's Baltic Fleet, has increased for Russia now that Sweden and Finland are expected to join NATO. Russia has long shown its rejection of the presence of NATO countries around Kaliningrad. They moved NATO infrastructure right to our borders, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said, after reports that Russia had moved nuclear-capable missiles to the region. And this is not U.S. territory, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's National Security Council, said in May, that the accession plans meant it will no longer be possible to talk about a non-nuclear status of the Baltics. The balance must be restored. The Russian exclave, created at the end of World War II in Old Königsberg, is a powerful nuclear missile base that can reach major European capitals in a short time. For example, in Germany, several analysts point out the Russian atomic threat, reiterated almost daily, has a risk in the Kaliningrad exclave. Berlin is only 530 kilometers from Kaliningrad's nuclear missiles. A few minutes are enough if the Russians launch hypersonic missiles to destroy the capital of Germany. But Kaliningrad's importance, above all, is due to its location on the map. Now the fear is, the Kremlin will go through the Suwalki Corridor, a corridor linking Belarus, where a satellite government of Moscow rules, and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. The corridor is doubly valuable for Russia because it provides an important military and commercial connection, and for the Baltic countries to the north, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, because if it were taken, they would be isolated from their allies in the European Union and NATO, which is why they call it the Achilles heel of the alliance, the strip on which security on the continent depends. Isolate the Baltic countries. That the Russians want to reconquer the Baltic countries is considered by many a pipe dream. However, this week in the Russian parliament, the Duma, there is a bill introduced by the deputy proposing to abolish the decision of the defunct Soviet Union to grant independence to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. These parliamentary bills claim that the independence granted by the Soviet Union was illegal, since an article of the Washington Treaty, when NATO was born, states that there can be no questioned territories in the alliance. NATO would then be forced to expel the 3 Baltic countries from the alliance, and it is obvious to assume what their fate would be. But from Washington, the US government made the clarification that the US never recognized the incorporation of the Baltic states into the Soviet Union in 1940. Deputy Fedorov replied that if Russia revokes their independence, the choice is simple: NATO must expel them from the alliance, or accept the start of a new war. But what will NATO do to counter the threats in Eastern Europe? NATO has detailed that it will increase its military presence in Spain, Poland, Romania, the United Kingdom, Germany, and the Baltic countries. Washington sent 20,000 additional troops to Europe earlier this year, bringing the number of US military personnel in the area to 100,000. Establishing a permanent 5th Army Corps base in Poland to strengthen its collaboration with NATO. It will also send 2 additional F-35 squadrons to the United Kingdom, as well as more air defense capabilities to Germany and Italy. The alliance has recently announced that it will increase the number of its rapid reaction forces to 300,000, 7 times their current size. Russian ruler Vladimir Putin has made a mistake. The attacks on Ukraine have united NATO more than at any time since the end of the Cold War, said NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Russia is not achieving a less powerful NATO, as it had demanded earlier this year. What it is getting is a larger Western alliance. Sweden and Finland will join in record time. NATO's door remains open, as promised in 2008, to Ukraine, Georgia, and other European states. The leaders of the Allied countries have approved NATO's new strategic concept, reflecting Russia as the most significant and direct threat to the security of the alliance, on the first day of the summit being held in Madrid. Moscow's military buildup, including in the Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and Mediterranean regions, along with its military integration with Belarus, challenge our security and interests, the document adds. But the Russian response could not wait. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has pointed out that the alliance's intentions to declare Russia a threat bears no relation to reality. It is precisely the alliance that poses a threat to us, he assured. The deputy minister told Russian media that NATO member countries, as well as Finland and Sweden, cede part of their sovereignty in defense and foreign policy to the United States. The document also includes for the first time China, which the member countries see as a challenge. Because of the deepening strategic partnership between China and Russia, and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undermine the international order, the document states. But for you, what do you think the new scenario might be with Sweden and Finland joining NATO? And what action do you think Russia might take in response? Do you think the Baltic peace will remain stable in the region? Or do you think a mutually beneficial multilateral agreement will be reached? Leave us your comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so, and to share this video. And see you in our next exploration in search of wonders around our planet.